when was the first time you could kind of recall, or you thought you've having a change of consciousness in terms of how you view everything?
I think it would have been just before September 2016. Uh,
Yeah. What spurred that on?
that would have been there was a worker demonstration on campus, uh, just around worker exploitation on campus, being underpaid, working conditions. And then I think as I sat there and listened to, I think it was Mam Nosi, speaking on the experience of workers on campus. And then it may have even been, I think, what sparked the big mass fall moment in 2016 on campus at UCT. And it was really at that point where I started to reflect not only not yet on high school, but first on my complacency in terms of how I've just been going around uh, university space, going into lecture, into TAT labs, but not being aware of what is actually happening around me. So I think that was the first confrontation to say that how really as a student, you pass workers every day, you enter into jammy shuttles, you sort of carry on as though there's a machinery that is functioning, but you're unaware of the people that are really at the core and are working for that machinery, and the type of violence and the type of
Mm.
exploitation that they're going through.
Sihle, if you don't mind, I want to just jump in here and ask you that maybe do you think that a lot of this consciousness and looking back and self-evaluation that you had to make there when you see the workers' plight is lost on white people for the simple reason that they don't see a white worker. They see a black person, and that's what they're used to from growing up. They're used to seeing a domestic worker come in from Langa, Kayalicha, and work in their houses and then go back home. And so that they've almost become completely immune to this image. Whereas if, like you said yourself, when you confront that, it hits home. Is there an antagonism there, or have I missed the mark?
Yeah, certainly so. I think you 100% you're onto something there, because it comes a normal way of life. It's status quo for in the white world. It makes sense to have black workers there. It makes sense to sort of ignore them as a machinery that happens in the background. I mean, if you're a white kid, you come home, you throw your dirty rugby socks on the couch. Someone's gonna come up and clean up after you. You're gonna leave. Someone's gonna clean your bedroom. Someone's
Mm-hmm.
gonna wash your clothes. So it makes sense for a white student at university to sort of not see any anomaly in the manner in which the university runs its course, because it's their everyday life. You see petrol attendants are black people. You see them at supermarkets, they're black people. So it's almost an automatic and normal position for them, and so it wouldn't upset you in any way. To understand and see the violence in which they go through. I mean, it's of course now I think it's changing.
Yeah,
Well, I'm not sure, but
slowly.
very few white families have a relationship with like a true and honest relationship with their domestic workers and domestic staff.
I mean that could be a conversation we have over 3 hours.
Yeah,
Just the complex relationship between there, because it's someone more often than not that's in your home consistently or even living on the property, and the relationship there is just so tricky. But if I can kind of bring it back to where we were, and it's probably for a bit of perspective for those or people listening or watching that don't necessarily know who you are. So you basically, and I'll hype you up a bit here. You left school. The world was your oyster. Scholarships here, scholarships there. You had meetings with Musi Mayamani, which I was very upset that I
yo,
wasn't invited to, etc.
comrade ratings straight down.
Yeah, it's not as you don't get as much clout from that now as you did back in the day, before Auntie Helen. But anyway, and the world was your oyster, and then, like you say, you confronted at university with this birth of consciousness, and then, of course, we find ourselves in a university system, just as fees must fall is really reaching its boiling point. And in short, I'd like to know, and we'll chat a bit about it, if you because everyone knows what Fees Must Fall was, but did you think Fees Must Fall was a success?
Look, I think certainly it had its limitations, but I think it was certainly a success in the sense of trying to reawaken South Africa into a long sleep. That I would say South Africa as a nation was in a long sleep post 1994. And there was no real. I mean, there was political action. I mean, there was Marikana, there was Endistatana, there was Abahlali Basemjondolo. I mean, there were various social movements. There was even the HIV activists at the time during in the Mbeki term. But I think really at a national scale and sort of sparking a conversation where everyone is speaking about this thing almost every day for weeks and sometimes up to a month, and asking deep structural questions. This is when debates of white supremacy came about, debates of capitalism, debates of workers and outsourcing. So I think Fees Must Fall at a level of re-conscientizing society and reawakening society to the deep slumber that it was at. It was successful in that right.
Would you say Fees Must Fall was hindered as much as it was successful in starting those sort of conversations, that it was also hindered that it had actually had to take the responsibility for this, just the magnitude of correcting all the wrongs in society almost in South Africa, and that was almost a cross or burden too heavy to bear?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and many people who many student leaders who reflect on it will even say, actually, as much as it was successful, but it was also a missed opportunity, because many of the struggles were limited to university spaces, or were limited to tertiary institution spaces. But the questions that we were raising on campus were questions that society is dealing with. The questions were Alexandra, Kailicha, were questions that everywhere. But I think a missed opportunity, perhaps what we did not do, was to go beyond the comfort of university spaces, beyond the comfort of being a student, and really going into the communities and doing the work there. So I think it as a spark, it was quite successful. But whether or not it was something that really did the long-term work towards conscientizing society and change society, I'm not so sure. And perhaps that may or may not have been its role. Perhaps something else had to happen after that. But I think really as a moment in South Africa where everything came at a standstill to speak about these issues, I think it was successful in that front.
Yeah, okay, I'll definitely agree with you in that respect. I mean, and also if you look at the very simple reading of it, the objective very crudely was for fees to fall, and to a large degree, fees did fall. So, and I mean, of course, I was at UCT at the same time. It was just a very strange moment to be actively involved in something that you knew in later down the line would be regarded as a historic event. And I think what I really want to emphasize is, and you've spoken beautifully about it, and almost more in terms of well, reigniting that conscious spark, I'd say. But Fees Must Fall was also ugly in a lot of respects, and I'm not leaning towards the violence or anything like that. I'm more concerned with the lives and livelihoods of people who were protesting. And I mean, like I said earlier, the world was your oyster, and I think because I mean I'm surrounded. We've got a lot of mutual friends, of course, and the conversation around you being so big on Fees Must Fall, there was a lot like he's very ungrateful. He's gotten this, which I mean is so problematic in its own right. But like can you believe Sihle is doing this? Can you actually believe Sihle? Our Sihle, hey, played first team rugby that week. Now he's in the EFF, eh? You know what I mean? And it was, but I don't.
Yeah.
They almost seem to intimate that what you had done was purely because it was in season, whereas I always respected you throughout because I knew the risks you were taking and what you were giving up, because you look at your scholarships, you look at your standing. I mean, any business would have snapped you up if you had just gone about your studies, left UCT with your degree, etc., etc. So what was the personal cost to you of Fees Must Fall?
Yeah, I mean, a personal cost to me, and this will probably, I mean, this is the case for many of us, really. But I mean, for me, I would say, obviously, you would know this. I mean, I lost my scholarship. Um Certain courses obviously let down. A degree that was meant to be finished in an X amount of years had to sort of go an additional year, and I'm now finishing that off additional in 6 months. So there's that, you know, and there's the stress because, as you would know, many of us, our homes, first generation graduates, you know. So your homes, your parents, everyone is sort of looking to you to get through this and get it done, so you can bring some sustenance at home. And then you find yourself in a situation or in a space where, more than anything else, I mean, it's out of material conditions more than anything. You are forced to participate in this activism. You know, it's not I don't think anyone would have done it because it's nice or there's luxury to it. I mean, it was horrible. It wasn't nice. Police brutality, victimization from lecturers at the university, student tribunals. I mean, those are not nice things. And I remember at the time people used to write as well about how, I mean, do you think, because there was a time where students, for example, would march, would protest with workers along with the sort of end outsourcing. And some days were rainy days, like rainy days. And you almost see just coming through to upper workers and students wearing black bags early in the morning, sort of marching to Bremner. Now, no one, no one wakes up in the AMs when it's pouring with rain, puts on a black bag to march to Bremner because it's cool, you know, or because it's in fashion, you know. So
Yeah, for
so
sure.
really, you're brought into that out of material conditions and out of a certain a fire within you, a conscious fire that leads you to confronting the realities that not only you face within that space, but people who look like you face within South Africa. So yeah,
Uh,
I mean, the personal losses were certainly scholarship, degree not being finished on time, and maybe even job opportunities. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it's. I think it's something that I would certainly do again. Um,
I was about to ask you, would you do it all again? And yeah, so you would, huh? That's amazing.
yeah, no, I'd do it again and again and again.
I think the core of the issue is that a lot of people couldn't understand why this was happening because I don't think they could physically put themselves in the student's shoes to understand that this was not a seasonal, oh, you know, I hate that joke about, oh, it's finals are coming up or exams are coming up. I hated that. It was actually disgusting. Um, these are people risking their whole lives. Like you said, first generation graduates, you know, you don't want anything more in life than that. And it's something that would make you so proud. And now you sacrifice that because there's that deeper fire, like you said. And one thing I was always interested, I remember I WhatsApped you the one day and you phoned me on another phone or you texted me back on another phone. You said, I'm not using this phone anymore. The police are after me. And I remember laughing because I thought you were joking. And then I think Mlandu was in jail like a day later, and it was very serious all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, it even there are there's a source, not a source, but the articles were written about what the state invested in terms of surveillance and trying to nip the movement in the bud. Because you must remember, this is the biggest this is the biggest threat to sort of ANC power, ANC government since 1994. Not only ANC government, but also even the economic elite, even the powers that be. Because some of the questions that these kids are raising are really, really deep questions that will change South Africa as we know it. So, if you, for example, if you listen to the manner in which the Minister of Education, Blade Nzimande, spoke then, he always tried to say that this is a regime change. Are these students funded elsewhere?
Mm.
You know, and that's always the response, really, to when young people sort of take it up and question certain things and are pushing for social change. I mean, it's not only South Africa. I think it's who's this the young girl for climate change?
Oh, Greta.
Greta. Yeah. I mean,
People hate her though. That's weird, eh? People really hate her.
eh?
People really hate that chick for some reason. I don't know what it's about. But we'll get into that another day. Sorry.
I don't know much about the politics, but I think what caught my ear was when I listened to the discourse around Greta. A lot of the old politicians, especially in the UN, were saying that there's no ways that these kids can come out of this independently. There must be a third force. They must be getting influenced by someone. The communists are funding these kids, and
The communists want to save the environment.
all sorts of funny things. So that was the discourse around South Africa as well. The ANC government was caught off guard because these are issues that they should have long dealt with, but they've been complacent. So this movement now became a big threat to them. They thought that regime change, ANC is now going to be replaced. These students must be funded somewhere, where in reality that was not the case. So that's why then surveillance was hectic, was tight. Police visibility was tight. The state really tried by all means, and sometimes with the help of certain vice chancellors, to really crunch down and stop. And there are many students. I mean, obviously the experiences that I've said on my side, things of losing scholarships, not being able to finish the degree in time, uh, being held at one time. There are students, for example, who have criminal records. There are students who spent an odd 3 or 4 years and only came out, I think, last year. So there's a real price that students paid, and I cannot imagine anyone who would risk sort of a criminal record, who would risk spending even a month, even a day in prison because it looks good on Instagram, or because they're trying to run away from writing an exam.
I know, it's when you actually unpack it and talk about it and think about it, it's just ridiculous. But yeah,
Yeah.
fees must fall. Fees must fall. Sure.